To make our pumpkin block, we're going to start with our pumpkin fabric and 4 fabric G squares. You're also going to need your stem fabric, which is fabric F. You're going to need a background J fabric, and then you will need 2 fabric K pieces for your stem. So we're going to set the stem pieces aside and start working on the pumpkin body. The first thing that we're going to do is mark a diagonal on the back of all 4 of our fabric G squares. Now, if you want to skip this step and just create a guide on your sewing machine, you can totally do that. There's lots of tutorials out there for how to use some tape, or I will sometimes even just use a Post-it note to create a straight line out from my needle and use that as a guide for lining it up. But if you want a little bit more accurate seam here, I would go ahead and mark all of your squares on the diagonal, and then you're going to take it to your sewing machine. You are going to place the fabric G square right sides together with one of the corners of your pumpkin block, and you want to make sure that it's lined up nice and straight. And then you're going to sew right on that drawn line. Now, again, if you would like a little bit more accurate corner on this, then I recommend you sew just to the inside of that drawn line. And what that will do is compensate for the bulk of the thread and that kind of thing and give you a really nice angle. Now, when I say all of these tips for getting more accuracy, they're just things that you can try. If they make the process cumbersome and unfun, then just skip them. And just using a guide and sewing on the line is going to get you close enough. And there's plenty of give in a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to be just fine with these. So make sure that you're enjoying the process no matter what. However, if accuracy is something that is really important to you, those are my tips: to draw the lines, so right on the inside of that line. And the other tip is, before you even cut these pieces out, starch them well. What that will do is help keep nice crisp creases when you go to press all of these angles right side out. So we're going to take this to our machine, we're going to sew it down, and then it is going to look like this. Now, this is another place that you can make a decision. You can either press this seam first, so take it to your iron, give it a really good press. That will help you line up the sides and make sure that they're nice and straight. And then go back with a pair of scissors and cut away this excess fabric underneath. Or you can trim away a 1/4 inch using your ruler and your rotary cutter, just like that. And then you can take it to your ironing board and then press that corner flat. Now, either way you do it, I really do recommend, if you have a quilter's clapper or some other pressing tool, you could use a book, you can use your rulers. But once you've pressed this and it's still warm, place something on top while it cools, and that will help those corners lay nice and flat. That's really helpful when you go to add in the sashing and things in between your pumpkins, if you're not fighting to get them to lay down, if they just stay nice and flat. Once you have that done, you are going to repeat the same process with your other fabric G squares. Now, you want to pay attention to the angles and make sure that the drawn line is connecting the 2 outer sides of your pumpkin square. And that way you make sure that you are snowballing those corners. This is also called a stitch and flip corner. And then you're going to repeat that for all 4 corners of your pumpkin. Once it's finished, it's going to look something like that. Once your pumpkin body is ready, then we're going to start working on our stem. The first thing you'll do is take your stem fabric and your fabric J piece, and you're going to put them right sides together and sew along one of the longer sides. If you have directional fabric you're working with for your stem, then you want to sew it on the top. So if this is the bottom, if there's a top and a bottom, you want that seam to be the top. For the background fabric, I strongly, strongly recommend, again, that you do not use a directional fabric. It will make your life a nightmare. Especially on these corners where you're flipping at angles and stuff, it just makes it tricky. Okay, so once you've sewn that, you're going to press it. I like to press my seam allowance towards the stem fabric, but it doesn't matter one way or the other. And then you're going to take your 2 fabric K pieces and you're going to sew them on either side of your stem piece. So once you have the first side, it's going to look like this. And I like to press it just towards this, toward the fabric K piece, only because there's extra bulk here. And you're not doubling up that seam there. So I press the seam allowance towards that. Then I'm going to add the second side, and then it's going to look something like that. The final step is to take your stem piece and sew it to the top of your pumpkin. So you can see in this fabric here that there's these little witch silhouettes in the damask and the bat. So there is a right side and a directionality to this fabric. So I'm going to sew the stem piece to the top of my pumpkin here. So I'm just going to put it right sides together. You want to make sure that your stem fabric is what's lined up with the top of that. And then you're just going to sew along that seam. Again, like all of it, it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then you're going to flip it up, and then you will have a pumpkin. And this one is already set inside the block, inside the row, but this is what your finished pumpkin is going to look like. So you're going to repeat that until you have 12 pumpkins finished, and that is the pumpkin block.